Critical infrastructure is the backbone of modern society, woven so tightly into our daily lives that we often take it for granted until something goes wrong. These are the systems, assets, and networks that together provide the essential services our way of life depends on. From the electricity that powers homes and hospitals to the water flowing from our taps, from the highways connecting cities to the digital networks that enable communication, critical infrastructure forms the foundation of our safety, security, and prosperity. The concept of critical infrastructure goes beyond just physical assets like bridges and power plants. It includes both tangible structures and the virtual systems that increasingly direct and support them. In the United States, these assets are so important that their incapacitation or destruction would have what experts call a debilitating effect on national security, public health, safety, or the economy. This broad definition highlights how interconnected these vital services are. A disruption in one can quickly ripple outward, affecting others in unexpected ways. To clarify this complex landscape, the United States has formally identified 16 sectors as critical infrastructure. Recognized by agencies such as the Department of Homeland Security and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, these sectors include chemical, commercial facilities, communications, critical manufacturing, dams, defense industrial base, emergency services, energy, financial services, food and agriculture, government facilities, healthcare and public health, information technology, nuclear reactors, materials and waste, transportation systems, and water and wastewater systems. Each sector is vital on its own, but it is their interdependence that makes the system both strong and, paradoxically, vulnerable. The importance of these sectors is not unique to the United States. Most countries have their own classifications, sometimes with fewer categories, but the principle remains the same. Certain facilities, networks, and systems are so essential that their disruption would have consequences far beyond their immediate function. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has studied these global approaches, emphasizing that resilience in critical infrastructure is a worldwide priority. At its core, critical infrastructure supports everything from national defense to market operations, from emergency response to the clean water that sustains public health. Americans, for example, rely on these infrastructures every day, often without noticing, until a storm knocks out power or a cyber attack disrupts banking systems. In those moments, we see just how much our quality of life and even our safety depend on the seamless operation of these networks. Ownership and management of critical infrastructure is often a shared responsibility. In the United States, much of this infrastructure is operated by private companies, while some sectors remain under government control. Regardless of ownership, protecting and strengthening these systems is a matter of public concern. Governing bodies have established regulations and standards to help safeguard these essential networks. Presidential directives and national protection plans have furthered efforts to secure and maintain resilient, functioning critical infrastructure. The interconnectedness of these sectors cannot be overstated. A disruption in one area, such as energy, can trigger cascading failures across others. For example, a loss of power can cripple transportation networks, disable communication systems, and threaten water treatment facilities. The complexity of these interdependencies means that even a localized incident can have national or even global repercussions. The idea of globally critical infrastructure recognizes that, in an age of international commerce and digital connectivity, the effects of a single failure can be felt far beyond any one country's borders. In recent years, the threats facing critical infrastructure have evolved. Historically, the greatest risks came from accidents or natural disasters, floods wiping out bridges or storms downing power lines. Flooding, for instance, can disrupt transportation by closing roads and damaging bridges, while also affecting power delivery and water treatment facilities. However, the modern era has brought new hazards, especially as digital technologies become more deeply embedded in physical infrastructure. Cyber threats now loom large, as critical infrastructure increasingly relies on information technology and interconnected control systems. Cyber attacks have escalated rapidly in both scale and sophistication. Between January 2023 and January 2024, global critical infrastructure was targeted by over 420 million cyber attacks, an average of about 13 attacks every second. Although the United States remains the primary target, more than 160 other countries have reported attacks on their critical infrastructure. Notably, 2024 stands out as a year when such attacks against government and public bodies surged, with ransomware and cyber espionage disrupting essential services, exposing sensitive data, and causing billions of dollars in damages. The stakes are high. When digital vulnerabilities are exploited, the impact is not just financial but can threaten lives and public safety. Some of the most alarming incidents involve direct interference with industrial control systems. There have been documented cases where cyber actors gained access to and manipulated critical systems in food production and manufacturing. In one publicized case, a German steel mill suffered severe damage after a cyber attack forced the shutdown of a furnace, an incident that shows how digital risks can lead to real-world consequences. The vulnerabilities facing critical infrastructure are not limited to technology. Human factors, including errors and insider threats, remain significant contributors to risk. In operational technology environments where older, legacy equipment is blended with modern digital controls, mistakes or malicious actions by employees can amplify vulnerabilities. As these systems become more complex and interconnected, the challenge of managing and reducing risk grows as well. Securing and protecting critical infrastructure is essential not just for national security, but to preserve the daily functions that support society. Government agencies, private operators, and international organizations all play a role in this ongoing effort. The resilience of these essential systems, whether they supply energy, safeguard public health, ensure the flow of goods and services, or protect our financial transactions, remains a central concern in an era marked by both technological promise and unprecedented risk. Ultimately, understanding critical infrastructure means recognizing how deeply it is woven into the fabric of daily life, how vulnerable it can be to evolving threats, and how essential its protection is to the well-being of nations and the world as a whole. In the heart of every thriving society lies a complex web of critical infrastructure, essential systems and facilities that quietly sustain daily life, commerce, and security. Yet beneath their apparent reliability, these networks harbor vulnerabilities that can be exposed by a range of threats, both familiar and unexpected. To understand what puts these vital assets at risk, we must explore the multifaceted nature of their weaknesses, the evolving threats they face, and the sobering real-world consequences when those vulnerabilities are exploited. Critical infrastructure is not a monolith. It encompasses everything from energy grids and water treatment plants to transportation hubs and healthcare facilities. Each component is uniquely susceptible to disruption, shaped by its physical design, technological foundations, and the people who operate it. One of the most pressing realities is that threats rarely occur in isolation. Instead, infrastructure failures often stem from what experts call common cause failures, events that can simultaneously disrupt multiple critical systems, even if those systems are not directly dependent on one another. For example, a widespread power outage might not only darken homes and businesses, but also knock out water pumping stations and paralyze transportation networks. The simultaneous collapse of unrelated sectors can leave communities scrambling to regain their footing, underscoring just how interconnected and vulnerable these lifelines truly are. The risk assessment of critical infrastructure has evolved into a sophisticated science, informed by a blend of historical incidents, predictive modeling, and international cooperation. In Europe, for instance, risk assessment methodologies draw from detailed disaster management guidelines and protection programs designed to make infrastructure more secure. These approaches encourage communities to look beyond the obvious, using structured assessments to uncover hidden weaknesses that might otherwise be overlooked. Such assessments are not static. They require continual revision as threats evolve and infrastructures age or expand. The spectrum of threats facing critical infrastructure is broad, encompassing both natural and man-made dangers. Natural disasters, severe weather, earthquakes, and floods can inflict catastrophic damage, but so can deliberate human actions, from terrorism to cyber attacks. These risks are not theoretical. In recent years, cyber attacks have emerged as one of the most formidable threats to critical infrastructure. Sophisticated actors, sometimes motivated by financial gain and other times by political objectives, have demonstrated the power to disrupt essential services with just a few keystrokes. The May 20, 2021 ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, for example, forced operational shutdowns and triggered widespread fuel shortages, illustrating how a virtual breach can have immediate, tangible effects on millions of lives. Physical threats, meanwhile, are ever present. Infrastructure is often physically accessible, sometimes by necessity, sometimes due to oversight providing opportunities for sabotage, theft, or simple negligence. Facilities such as dams, power stations, and pipelines are especially attractive targets, given their outsized impact when compromised. The consequences of these attacks can extend far beyond the immediate loss of service. Damage to mining, oil, or gas facilities, for instance, can threaten human life, harm wildlife, and inflict long-term environmental consequences. Yet not all vulnerabilities result from malicious intent or force majeure. Human error and organizational weaknesses are persistent sources of risk. Poor credential management and lax authentication practices account for a significant number of security breaches, an uncomfortable reality in a world where a single compromised password can mean the difference between business as usual and a national emergency. The blending of older operational technology with cutting-edge digital controls can further complicate matters, introducing unforeseen points of failure and making comprehensive security an ongoing challenge. The diversity of critical infrastructure brings with it a diversity of weak points. In some cases, failures are triggered by internal faults rather than external shocks. Computer failures, whether accidental or due to underlying system flaws, have the potential to halt operations. The annals of modern infrastructure are filled with examples of bridges collapsing, dams failing, and transportation accidents occurring without warning or apparent cause. The cascading effects can be profound, as seen in the aftermath of the 2008 ice storm in southern China. There, a massive power system failure led to a domino effect, disrupting not only electricity, but also water supply, transportation, and public safety. Such events serve as potent reminders that the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure are as much about what goes wrong inside the system as what might come from outside. Securing critical infrastructure against these diverse threats demands more than just robust walls and firewalls. Protection strategies increasingly rely on continuous monitoring, employee training, and systematic incident response planning. Public-private partnerships are essential, as the stewardship of infrastructure often spans governmental and corporate boundaries. The use of advanced tools, from supervisory control and data acquisition systems to operational technology platforms, supports both detection and rapid response, though these same technologies can become targets themselves if not properly secured. A persistent challenge is that many threats are dynamic, adapting in response to new defenses. Advanced persistent threat actors, for instance, exploit a broad array of techniques to evade security controls. To counter this, national security agencies recommend a suite of mitigation strategies, from regular patch management to endpoint protection and automated monitoring. Still, no single measure is sufficient. True resilience is built through layers of defense, comprehensive planning, and the cultivation of a workforce that is both vigilant and informed. The public's perception of vulnerability is shaped by both experience and awareness. Surveys suggest that a strong majority of people recognize the fragility of major infrastructure sectors, particularly those underpinning communications, energy, and financial services. This awareness can be a double-edged sword, fostering both a sense of urgency and a sense of anxiety about the risks that lie just beneath the surface of everyday life. Ultimately, the identification of vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure is not a one-time task but a continuous process. It involves scrutinizing the physical, digital, and human elements that comprise essential systems, learning from failures both past and present, and anticipating the threats yet to emerge. As societies become more dependent on these complex networks, the imperative to understand and address their weak points only grows. The goal is not to eliminate all risk, a virtual impossibility, but to build infrastructures capable of withstanding, absorbing, and rapidly recovering from whatever challenges may arise. In so doing, nations and communities alike can better safeguard the backbone of modern life against the uncertainties of an ever-changing world. When we consider the consequences of compromised critical infrastructure, we must confront a chain of events that rarely ends with a single failure. The impact almost always extends beyond the initial breach or breakdown, reverberating through communities, economies, and even the fabric of national security. Protecting critical infrastructure is not an abstract exercise. It is a daily imperative because so much of our health, safety, and everyday routines depend on the smooth functioning of these essential systems. When something goes wrong, the effects are felt everywhere, from the food on our tables to the reliability of emergency services. Understanding these consequences is not simply about imagining worst-case scenarios. It requires systematic assessment, learning from real-world events, and anticipating how vulnerabilities might be exploited in ways that threaten our collective well-being. Recent years have made these risks all too tangible. In one harrowing incident, workers at a water treatment plant in Oldsmar, Florida, watched in disbelief as an intruder remotely manipulated their system, increasing the levels of sodium hydroxide to dangerous, potentially deadly concentrations. Only the vigilance of an alert operator prevented a crisis that could have poisoned thousands. This was not a theoretical risk, but a narrowly averted catastrophe, a stark reminder that the stakes are truly life and death. Such events are not isolated. In a hypothetical scenario, A cyber attack in western Norway saw hackers take control of a dam's systems, opening a valve and leaving it exposed for hours. Investigations in this scenario revealed the attackers had exploited weak credentials on an internet-connected control panel, highlighting how even a single overlooked vulnerability can become the entry point for large-scale disruption. These incidents illustrate the concept of cascading failures. When a critical system is compromised, the immediate consequences may be clear contaminated water, a breached dam, but the aftershocks can spread much further. Imagine a region facing a hurricane. Power outages can quickly disable communication networks, hamper emergency response, and endanger public health. Case studies of regional approaches to infrastructure resilience after such disasters show that recovery depends on the interconnectedness of systems and the ability to adapt, coordinate, and invest in long-term solutions. In Costa Rica, for example, policies and practices have been shaped to ensure that critical systems are more resilient against future threats, focusing on protecting not just property, but the very way of life in each community. The evolving landscape of threats has changed the calculus for industrial organizations and governments alike. In the past 12 months, there has been a marked increase in advanced ransomware attacks and vulnerabilities within supply chains, exposing the soft underbelly of even the most robust-seeming systems. The lesson, as many organizations have learned, is that threat actors are growing more sophisticated, and so must our defenses. Proactive threat intelligence and robust incident response plans are no longer optional. They are the minimum standard for survival in this new environment. The frequency and severity of these attacks have compelled cybersecurity agencies worldwide to collaborate more closely, pooling knowledge and issuing unified guidance on the safe deployment of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence within critical infrastructure. Artificial intelligence itself is a double-edged sword, a tool that promises to enhance detection, streamline operations, and respond to incidents with unprecedented speed, but one that also introduces new risks. As artificial intelligence capabilities are integrated into control systems and monitoring platforms, the risk profile shifts, demanding new forms of vigilance and fresh strategies for managing unexpected cyber threats. The future of infrastructure security will depend on how effectively we harness these technologies while containing their potential to be turned against us. Risk assessment methodologies have had to evolve alongside these realities. It is no longer sufficient to rely on static checklists or periodic audits. Instead, best practices now call for a continuous, dynamic approach supported by real-time data and informed by the lessons of recent incidents. At the heart of these methodologies is a simple but powerful idea. Consequences must be anticipated, not just measured after the fact. This means understanding not only the direct impacts, such as the immediate loss of a service, but also the broader, sometimes unexpected, effects on society at large. For example, a breach in one region's industrial control systems can ripple outward, affecting supply chains, economic stability, and even international relations. The interconnected nature of these systems means that a successful attack in one place can create vulnerabilities elsewhere, often in unpredictable ways. The broader implications of compromised infrastructure touch every corner of society. Public safety is the most visible concern, as failures in water, energy, or transportation systems can quickly escalate into emergencies. Economic continuity is also at risk when key services are interrupted. A single successful attack can cost millions or even billions in lost productivity, emergency response, and recovery. On a national scale, these disruptions can undermine public confidence, strain government resources, and expose weaknesses that adversaries may be eager to exploit. To counter these risks, experts emphasize the importance of partnerships that cross organizational and sectoral boundaries. Information sharing between public and private stakeholders is crucial, as is the establishment of clear lines of communication before, during, and after an incident. Heightened international collaboration has become essential, especially as cyber threats grow more complex and borderless. In this environment, resilience is not just about withstanding the first blow, but about having the capacity to recover, learn, and adapt, whether the emergency is a cyber attack, a natural disaster, or an unforeseen technological failure. At the community level, building resilience requires both preparedness and investment. The ability to respond to emergencies, including the possibility of multiple concurrent crises, demands foresight and a commitment to reducing risks wherever possible. This may mean investing in more secure infrastructure, training personnel, or developing new regional strategies modeled on successful case studies from around the world. The preservation of property, life, and the continuity of daily routines depends on these investments, not only in physical assets, but in the systems and relationships that support our collective response. Ultimately, the assessment of consequences in critical infrastructure is not a static discipline. It is an ongoing process, shaped by the evolving tactics of adversaries, the advance of new technologies, and the unpredictable challenges of our interconnected world. The price of vulnerability is measured not just in dollars, but in the trust, safety, and stability of entire societies. By recognizing the true scope of the risks we face and responding with informed, integrated strategies, we can begin to close the gaps that threaten the systems we all rely on today and into the uncertain future. Mitigating the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure is a task that demands both breadth and depth, an ongoing process shaped by evolving threats, technological innovation, and the hard-earned lessons of past incidents. As the landscape of risk grows more complex, the strategies for defending the essential systems that underpin society have become increasingly sophisticated and wide-ranging. At the core of these efforts lies a delicate balance, harnessing new technologies and policy frameworks while ensuring that resilience is woven into the very fabric of our infrastructure. A foundational element of this approach is risk assessment. In Europe, reports describe methodologies rooted in comprehensive disaster management guidelines, drawing on detailed mapping and analysis to pinpoint vulnerabilities. These methodologies are not static checklists but dynamic processes that communities can adapt to their unique infrastructure profiles. They guide practitioners through identifying critical assets, evaluating potential hazards, and prioritizing the measures most likely to prevent catastrophic disruptions. This approach recognizes that critical infrastructure risk involves not only the likelihood of a threat, but also the potential impact on society if that threat materializes. However, the science of risk assessment is not immune to human factors. Research highlights the influence of decision-making heuristics and biases, which can undermine even the most robust assessment methodologies. This realization has prompted infrastructure managers to adopt a more reflective stance, encouraging them to question their own assumptions and seek diverse perspectives when evaluating risk. The goal is to foster a culture where vigilance and adaptability are valued as highly as technical expertise. Once vulnerabilities are identified, mitigation strategies come into play. Effective mitigation is systematic. It starts with identifying threats and extends through the implementation of security controls, rigorous endpoint protection, and relentless patch management. The use of automated tools has become especially important as the volume and speed of cyber threats continue to rise. Automated monitoring systems can detect anomalies in real time, flagging suspicious activity before it escalates into a crisis. Yet technology alone is not enough. Poor credential management and weak authentication remain leading causes of organizational breaches, highlighting the need for robust access controls and vigilant oversight of who can interact with sensitive systems. Recommendations from cybersecurity agencies and national security authorities reflect an ever-expanding circle of concern. For operators of critical infrastructure, the emphasis is on holistic defense, not just firewalls and antivirus software, but layered approaches that include incident response planning, employee training, and continuous monitoring. These measures are designed to counter a broad spectrum of exploitation techniques, from advanced persistent threats to opportunistic intrusions. Public-private partnerships are another pillar of critical infrastructure resilience. Since no single entity owns or operates all vital assets in a region, collaboration between governments and private sector operators is essential. These partnerships enable the sharing of threat intelligence, coordination during emergencies, and alignment of restoration priorities when disaster strikes. Compliance with state and national laws and regulations is a baseline requirement, but the most effective partnerships go further, embracing information sharing as a way to anticipate, rather than merely react to, danger. Technological advancements have opened new frontiers in both risk and resilience. Emerging digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, now offer the promise of faster, more reliable resilience evaluations and more informed decision-making. Artificial intelligence tools can sift through vast amounts of operational data to identify subtle patterns that might signal the early stages of an attack or a developing failure. However, as infrastructure operators integrate artificial intelligence into their systems, they must also contend with new categories of risk-novel attack vectors that exploit the very intelligence meant to protect. Recognizing the double-edged nature of these technologies, global cybersecurity agencies have shifted from theoretical debate to practical guidance, issuing unified protocols to ensure artificial intelligence is deployed safely and reliably within critical infrastructure environments. The concept of resilience itself has evolved. It is no longer defined solely by the ability to withstand disruption. It now encompasses the capacity to recover quickly and adapt in the face of uncertainty. Resilience strategies require the involvement of key individuals from across an enterprise, not just those in information technology. Continuity planning, preparedness exercises, and response measures must draw on insights from operations, human resources, legal departments, and executive leadership. This multidisciplinary engagement ensures that, even if a cyber attack succeeds or a disaster occurs, the organization is prepared to limit the damage, restore services, and learn from the experience. International collaboration has become increasingly prominent as threats grow more sophisticated and borderless. Industrial control systems, which govern everything from power grids to water treatment plants, are interconnected in ways that make the consequences of a single attack potentially global. In response, nations have begun to align their efforts, pooling knowledge and resources to confront the challenges posed by sophisticated adversaries. The convergence of operational technology and information technology, the so-called cyber-physical dimension, has prompted industrial organizations to focus more intensely on proactive threat intelligence and on building robust incident response plans that can be activated at a moment's notice. The drive toward resilience has also taken root at the regional and community levels. Case studies show that regional approaches to infrastructure resilience, especially in the aftermath of major disasters, can have profound impacts on recovery and adaptation. Building capacity to respond to emergencies, including the possibility of multiple concurrent crises, requires both immediate action and long-term investment in more resilient structures and systems. These efforts are not just technical or operational challenges. They are fundamentally about preserving the ways of life that depend on the uninterrupted delivery of essential services. As the future unfolds, the lessons of recent years are unmistakable. The threats facing critical infrastructure are intensifying, shaped by rapid technological change, geopolitical tensions, and the ever-present possibility of human error. But so too are the strategies for mitigation and resilience evolving. Through systematic risk assessment, technological innovation, coordinated policy frameworks, and the cultivation of public, private, and international partnerships, societies are building the capacity not just to survive disruptions, but to emerge from them stronger and more prepared for what lies ahead. The work is never finished, but each advance, each layer of defense, each hard-won insight brings us closer to a future where the systems that sustain modern life are as resilient as they are essential. Looking ahead, the future of critical infrastructure protection unfolds as a story of both daunting new challenges and pioneering innovation. As the world's essential systems become ever more tightly woven into the digital fabric of society, the boundaries between physical and virtual vulnerabilities continue to blur. Operators and providers of critical infrastructure now find themselves at a crossroads, compelled to adopt transformative technologies, yet required to confront a threat landscape that evolves just as rapidly as the tools designed to defend against it. Artificial intelligence stands at the heart of this transformation. The push to integrate artificial intelligence into critical infrastructure is gaining momentum, with operators seeking to harness its potential for operational efficiency, predictive maintenance, and especially for detecting and responding to cyber threats. There is growing recognition that, when properly implemented, artificial intelligence can enable more capable and resilient systems. These machines sift through vast streams of operational data at speeds and scales far beyond human reach, offering the promise of catching subtle anomalies before they escalate into crises. Yet, as these advanced systems become embedded in the core of power grids, water supplies, and manufacturing lines, they introduce a paradox. The same artificial intelligence capabilities that help defend these assets also open up new avenues for attack. Malicious actors are already probing the complexity of artificial intelligence-driven systems, searching for weaknesses not only in the algorithms themselves, but also in the ways people interact with and depend on them. This duality has not gone unnoticed by those responsible for safeguarding the world's vital assets. In a significant development, global cybersecurity agencies have issued their first unified guidance on the application of artificial intelligence within critical infrastructure. This step marks a decisive shift from theoretical debates to concrete, practical measures, establishing guardrails intended to ensure that the deployment of these powerful technologies is both safe and reliable. The consensus emerging from this guidance is clear. While artificial intelligence promises to strengthen our defenses, it must be governed by rigorous oversight, continuous monitoring, and a willingness to adapt as both the technology and the threats continue to evolve. The tension between opportunity and risk extends beyond artificial intelligence. The broader landscape of critical infrastructure protection is entering what some observers describe as a new phase one, shaped by convergence, consequence awareness, and a collective determination to build resilience across the interconnected systems that sustain modern life. This convergence is multifaceted. Operational technology, information technology, and now intelligent automation are coming together, creating systems that are smarter but also more complex and, in some respects, more fragile. This complexity is compounded by the increasingly borderless nature of digital threats. Cyber attacks that once targeted isolated systems now have the potential to ripple across continents, affecting supply chains, economic stability, and even the delicate balance of international relations. An attack on one region's industrial control system can easily spill over into others, especially since many critical infrastructure installations, power grids, water supplies, and manufacturing processes share similar technical architectures. A breach in one locale can quickly become a global incident, and this interconnectedness demands an unprecedented degree of international cooperation. Recent years have seen a marked escalation in both the scale and sophistication of cyber threats. Incidents have underscored that critical infrastructure is not just a target for criminal enterprises or rogue hackers, but is increasingly in the crosshairs of state-backed actors and ideologically motivated groups. The motivations behind these attacks are diverse, ranging from economic disruption and political leverage to attempts at undermining public trust in essential services. The consequences, as states have emphasized in international security forums, are rarely contained within national borders. Attacks on critical infrastructure can threaten not only security but the everyday lives of people around the world. In response, partnerships between the public and private sectors have become a cornerstone of modern critical infrastructure protection. These collaborations enable the timely sharing of threat intelligence, the pooling of expertise, and the swift alignment of defensive strategies when new vulnerabilities are discovered or attacks are underway. The value of such partnerships is magnified by the fact that much of the world's critical infrastructure is operated by a complex web of private firms, government agencies, and international consortia. The lessons of recent years make it clear no single entity can go it alone. Information sharing, however, is not without its challenges. Issues of trust, data privacy, and competitive interests can sometimes stand in the way of truly open collaboration. Nonetheless, the momentum is moving steadily toward greater transparency and cooperation, spurred by the recognition that the cost of not working together is simply too high. The experiences of recent international gatherings, where defenders, engineers, and intelligence analysts have come together for marathon sessions of knowledge exchange, underscore the growing sense of shared responsibility and shared vulnerability. Looking further into the future, the imperative to ramp up resilience is shaping the very design of modern urban environments. Researchers and practitioners are not only focused on defending existing systems, but are also working on transformative pathways for city infrastructure. This involves reimagining how essential services are delivered and protected, with resilience built in from the ground up. The goal is not merely to withstand the shocks of tomorrow, but to recover swiftly and adapt to whatever the future holds. One of the most profound changes is in how the world thinks about consequence awareness. Where once the focus was on preventing any breach at all costs, there is now an acceptance that some incidents are inevitable. The emphasis has shifted toward minimizing the impact, containing the damage, and ensuring that essential services can bounce back quickly. This pragmatic approach is reinforced by a collective determination among stakeholders to strengthen the capacity for rapid recovery and to learn continually from each new incident. Despite these advances, certain vulnerabilities remain stubbornly persistent. Legacy systems, often running on outdated software and hardware, continue to pose significant risks. The challenge of integrating these older components with cutting-edge technologies is a delicate balancing act, one that will require ongoing attention, investment, and the willingness to make difficult choices about when to upgrade, replace, or retire critical assets. Finally, the future of critical infrastructure protection will be shaped not just by technology and policy, but by the willingness of nations to foster international cooperation on a scale never before seen. The interconnectedness of the world's essential systems means that resilience in one country is inextricably linked to the resilience of its neighbors and trading partners. As services trade and the movement of goods and information become ever more central to global growth, the imperative to protect the infrastructure that underpins this system-wide interdependence only grows stronger. In sum, the road ahead for critical infrastructure protection is as complex as it is vital. The landscape is shifting rapidly, driven by technological innovation, the evolving tactics of adversaries, and the relentless march of globalization. Yet amidst these challenges, there is also a sense of possibility, a collective resolve to build systems that are stronger, smarter, and more resilient than ever before. The future will demand adaptability, vigilance, and above all, a spirit of cooperation that transcends borders and sectors, uniting all who depend on the hidden machinery of modern life.